Hi everyone, it's Sonia here. I want to give you an update on how it's going in Quebec, and let me tell you, it's not going well. We're getting constant fear mongering from our media, and actually you don't even have to dig very far to find out that there are so many fallacies in what they're saying. I mean, really, they'll give you the alarming headline, which is what most people will read and share, and the rumor will spread. And if you actually bother to read the article, they'll tell you a lot of the story, the rest of the story in the article. So like contradicting themselves right there. So I'll tell you a couple things. Is number one, doctors are now saying that people who don't take precautions and end up in the ICU don't deserve to get treatment. And they're also telling us, oh my God, look how many children are in the hospital with the virus. But then you'll find out that there's a lot more to the story. It's not nearly as bad as they want us to think. And their statistics are all screwed up, and they know it. Before I start, I want to let you know about C60 EVO, which is ESS 60, which has been super helpful to me. This is the stuff that fixed my sleep problem. It's a very powerful antioxidant and anti-inflammatory. It helps me get really good sleep, but in the day, it helps me have more energy. I'll give you a link below to a video that I made where I go into detail about this, but this stuff is really awesome. That's why I'm on here telling you guys about it. And if you want to try it out, if you use the link below, you will get $10 off. So check it out. Also, I just want to say thank you to everyone for supporting me on my Patreon, which helps keep my channel going. If you donate as little as $1 a month, you will get notified by me personally every time I upload or every time I do a premiere with live chat. And you'll also get extra info and backstory. So thanks again for your support. Also, if you like this video, don't forget to hit like and leave me a comment. That's another way you can help support my channel. So, okay, here we go. This is from La Presse, but I translated in English. The headline is, "Cry from the heart of intensivists, it's hanging by a thread." Now look, I don't doubt that the doctors are having a hard time, but there's so much more to the story. A big part of the problem is that nurses have quit because the government decided to impose these like restrictions on them or these demands on them, which extended not only during the period of crisis, but are just sort of ongoing. You cannot choose your hours. They can make you work night shift, they can make you work weekends, they can make you work overtime. You have nothing to say about it. And this is for all departments of all hospitals at all times. So imagine if you're a nurse and you have kids and now you cannot make your schedule. You never know what's coming. It's just unmanageable. So that's one reason people have quit. And the more they try to push the nurses to do like to not be human anymore, the more they quit, the worse the problem gets. Actually, recently they decided they were going to hire doctors to do the nurses' jobs, but they're paying them doctor salaries to do the nursing. As in, they're paying them $211 per hour, whereas the nurses get, I think, $27. So the nurses are now actually even more pissed off about that. So maybe more of them will quit. So what's going on here is the intensivist Dr. Michel de Marchi. He's fed up with people who do not follow health instructions, or those, worse still, who do not believe in the virus. Quote, "They did nothing to protect themselves, their families, and the people around them. They may have infected strangers. This is not acceptable at the moment," he blurted out. "They come to take the beds of other people who are making an effort." That doctor was saying that if you didn't take precautions, you don't deserve to be treated. As much as they're railing against the patients who didn't take enough precautions, later on they admit, we have absent staff, we have to have more beds. At 14 beds, we're full. Really, 14? At 21, it is difficult to find nurses. See, that's the problem. 14 beds doesn't seem like a lot. Imagine, at 21 beds, it's difficult to find nurses. That's how short they are on staff. Who's to blame for that? The issue is not the lack of beds, it is the lack of nurses. I mean, you know, the statistics are right there. If you look at how many people are in the hospital, it's hard to understand, like I said in my other video, it's hard to understand why they can't handle it now when they could handle it in the spring. And they were bragging like, oh, we can handle this and we can handle so much more. And now it's like, oh, we can't handle it because the nurses quit. Oh yeah, I wanted to tell you, there's another reason why it really ticks me off when people blame people for getting sick. It looks to me like there's not a whole lot of rhyme or reason. I mean, yes, there are things that we're all told to do to protect ourselves, like wash your hands, wear a mask, stay away from other people. But you know, you can do all those things and you can still get sick. Obviously, my friend's husband was very, very fastidious with obeying all those things, very, very careful. It was like practically in complete isolation for the whole year. And his boss too. And his boss got it. And even though they were doing all the hand washing and everything, and they weren't like exactly like near each other, but they were at opposite ends of a large room, the boss gave it to my friend's husband. Well, he went home. She slept in the bed with him, obviously not wearing a mask. She never got it. Her parents who live upstairs, they never got it. They all got tested. None of them had it. So that was weird. Who knows why? So they're trying to figure out where his boss got it from. My friend's husband's boss. So he was thinking, well, it might have been my son, my teenager. Maybe he was out with his friends and, you know, he brought it home. Tested the family, tested the kid. They didn't have it. He didn't get it from his family. And they were living with him. He's sick. They're living with him and they didn't even get it. And they didn't give it to him because they didn't have it. So who knows where he got it. I mean, he could have done all the stuff that he was supposed to do, and then maybe he was in a store and he just came across this virus and he got sick. Gave it to his coworker, my friend's husband. He goes home to his family and none of them get it. So, you know, how are you going to blame people? Because people who are taking all the precautions, they still get it. I saw another, it was like a report here. It was a family with a small child, and they all got it. They got really sick. They didn't end up in hospital, but it was bad. And they kept saying, well, we did everything right. We took all the precautions. And then you see other people that are, you know, they've got the breathing tube, and they're like, please listen to the authorities. Please wear your mask. Take this seriously, because I didn't believe it. Look at me now. So there's people who did everything right. They still got it. There's people who did everything wrong. They still got it. There's people who did everything wrong, they didn't get it. There's people who did everything right, they didn't get it. I mean, really, yeah, like, how are you going to blame people for getting sick? And again, they're warning people there's going to be this disaster medicine triaging patients. They just might not treat some people. And they give the example, if the system is overflowing, it's not a question that concerns just cases of COVID. In the worst case, you arrive at the hospital, you're young, you have appendicitis, and all your organs are failing. I have no room. I'm pissed because I think that a lot of nurses would be there if they were being treated better. Because you know what they've done? They've gone to the private side. They're working in private retirement homes, private clinics. They're working for plastic surgeons. And they're going on the private side even with less pay because at least they can make their own schedule. The schedule's consistent. And they're not under this kind of duress and with all these restrictions. So here's the second thing. More young people hospitalized with COVID than in first wave, but number remains small. Oh, they changed the headline. They did change the headline. Originally, and you can still see the headline, if you look at the URL, 15 Quebec children and teens in hospital with COVID-19, 2 in ICUs. That was the headline. That's what people saw when it was being shared on Facebook. 15 children, teen, COVID, hospital, ICU. That's what they saw. And they changed it. So when you read this article, you're going to find out 15 children and teenagers with COVID were reported in hospitals across the province on Friday. 2 cases in pediatric intensive care. But then they tell you that some children are hospitalized for non-COVID ailments but test positive for it while in hospital as part of standard screening. So they're not actually there because they have COVID complications. They're there for some other reason. It could have been absolutely anything. Could have been a broken leg. Could have been some surgery they needed because of some condition they have. And they test positive, and then it goes in the statistics as a COVID hospitalization. And then they're saying at the Montreal Children's Hospital, we're running anywhere from 0 to 3 admitted children who happen to be COVID positive on any given day. And that goes into statistics as COVID hospitalizations. But it's, you know what I'm saying? Is it really? And Salamone noted that in 40% of such cases, the reason for initial hospitalizations was for a non-COVID medical problem. So 40% of them, they're not even there for related to the COVID. And then they also explained out of the other 60%, there's another factor. Some autistic adolescents living in group homes have been transferred to Quebec's largest pediatric center, even though they have mild COVID-19. So out of the ones that are there because of COVID, some of them, they have mild COVID. What are they doing in the hospital? Had they been living with their family, they would have stayed home. But because they're in some sort of group home or intermediate resource, the supervisors are not allowed to keep them. They have to transfer them to the hospital. So this accounts for a lot of the kids that are in the hospital that count as COVID statistics. They either came in for something totally different, not related to COVID, or it's related to COVID in the sense that they got COVID, but they're not that sick, but they can't stay in the group home, you know? Sometimes people send me some links for statistics, which, you know, it would be really interesting, such as this one here from inspq.qc.ca, comparing flu hospitalizations and COVID hospitalizations for each age group. Well, that could be really interesting, except for the fact that, like what I just told you, what's a COVID hospitalization? My own mother was sent to the hospital when she had COVID, not because she was so sick, but because she wouldn't stay in her room, because she has dementia. My mother was another COVID hospitalization. And then, in case you didn't know, she almost died of dehydration while she was up there because they didn't make her drink, or, you know, they just gave her the stuff and walked away. And after 3 days, I got to find out her lab results because my friend Lara was working in that ward. I found out my mother was close to dying of dehydration. She was delirious, and they had strapped her into a wheelchair. They had tied her down, but they didn't give her an IV. They said, oh, she pulled it out. What kind of an excuse is that? She survived because then Lara Lara knew, and I had called the hospital and said, hey, what are you doing? She needs an IV. And then as Lara was there, they had to tie my mother's arms down. They did that to save her life, to give her an IV for the dehydration. And guess what? The next morning she was fine. And they had been saying, oh, it's because of the COVID. She's delirious. It's because of the COVID. She's dehydrated. So my mother was this close to being a COVID death, you know. God bless Lara. She saved her life. So yeah, these statistics are totally mixed up. And then we have all this from the same inspq.qc.ca, and they show you all these hospitalizations. And I'm wondering, I mean, if they do that for the kids, how many of these hospitalizations of adults are also people who were just tested positive when they arrived? Because I know that whatever you go to the hospital for, before they admit you, they're going to test you. I know someone who had an injury where an artery was torn and she was on the verge of bleeding to death, and they wouldn't admit her until they'd given her a COVID test. Now, if she had tested positive, guess what? She would have counted as a COVID hospitalization. So, I mean, how can they make any sense of what's happening here in Montreal? They're talking about bringing cases down, bringing hospitalizations down, this and that. How can they make any sense when their starting point is these statistics that aren't giving a very accurate picture of what's going on? It's just mind-blowing. I mean, here we are, we're under curfew. All the non-essential businesses are closed. You go into a store like a pharmacy and you're not even allowed to buy certain things. They decided that shoelaces are non-essential. You know, the kids had been on online schooling, which is super hard for everybody. People are working at home. People are isolated. People are miserable. And that our government is not even keeping track of statistics accurately. It's pretty bad. I'm pissed, honestly. These are professionals. These are professional statisticians, you would think, and epidemiologists who are keeping track of these things. How can it be that no one who works there could say, well, maybe we should have a separate, you know, graph, like put them in two colors, people who were hospitalized for COVID and people who were hospitalized who tested positive? How hard would it be to do that so we could get a more accurate picture? Because then when you go back to this stuff here, where they show you hospitalizations compared to flu. I mean, when you go to the hospital in a normal winter season, they don't test you for flu. And what if they tested everyone who came in for flu? Then they would say they had more flu hospitalizations if they used the same logic they use for COVID. Anyway, it's crazy. Oh yeah, and here's another thing. The hospitalizations even that we had in spring and the deaths, let's not forget. Seniors arriving at hospitals from CHSLDs are dehydrated and malnourished. I'm not going to go over the whole thing, but the doctor from the Jewish, Vin Kim Nguyen, he was saying that the seniors are arriving starved and dehydrated, and they're dying of starvation because they were so severely neglected in the CHSLDs. So when we look at the death statistics in senior from the spring, how come this isn't being taken into account? It's all COVID. Like, yes, they had COVID. Yes, they died. But there was other stuff that factored into that, and it's not represented anywhere. We have no idea how many of them died from dehydration and how many of them died from, organ failure or like lung failure from the disease itself. We don't know. It's totally mixed up. That's what we get up here. Anyway, I thought you might want to know. Just giving you an update. I hope you found that interesting. So that's it. Thanks again for your support on Patreon. And don't forget to check out the link for more info on this and a discount. Thanks for joining me in the chat. Whoops. God bless you guys. Thanks for listening to me, and I'll see you next time.